Imagine waking up one day speaking a completely different language you've never learned, or having your hair turn white overnight from sheer terror. Throughout history, the human body has presented us with mysteries so bizarre that even modern medicine struggles to explain them. Today, we're diving into 5 medical enigmas that defied the greatest minds of their time and continue to baffle doctors today. In the summer of 1518, the cobblestone streets of Strasbourg witnessed something that defied all reason, something that would consume hundreds of souls in a dance they could not stop. It began with a single woman. Frau Troffea stepped into the narrow street one July morning and began to dance. But this was no celebration, no moment of joy. Her movements were frantic, desperate, as if controlled by an invisible puppeteer. Hour after hour, she continued her relentless dance, her feet bleeding against the stones, her body refusing rest. Days passed, and still she danced. Within a week, 34 others had joined her macabre ballet. They came from their homes, their workshops, their daily lives, drawn into the same compulsive rhythm that held Frau Troffea captive. The affliction spread like wildfire through the medieval city. By month's end, over 400 people writhed and spun in the streets, their faces twisted with exhaustion and terror, yet unable to stop their bodies from moving. The local authorities, desperate to understand this inexplicable phenomenon, consulted physicians and scholars who proclaimed a startling cure: more dancing. They reasoned that the afflicted must dance out their ailment, purging whatever demon or disease had taken hold. Stages were hastily constructed, musicians were hired, and the city officially sanctioned what had become a nightmare. The music played on, and so did the dancers. But the cure proved more deadly than the disease. One by one, the dancers began to collapse. Heart attacks claimed some, strokes felled others, and many simply succumbed to sheer exhaustion. Their bodies, pushed beyond all human limits, finally found the rest that their minds had been unable to grant them. The streets that had echoed with the sound of dancing feet now fell silent, littered with the consequences of an inexplicable madness. Modern science offers theories but no certainty. Some suggest mass psychogenic illness, a collective hysteria born from the stress and superstition of medieval life. Others point to ergot poisoning from contaminated grain, a toxic fungus that can cause hallucinations and uncontrollable muscle spasms. Yet no explanation fully captures the horror of what transpired in those summer streets. Today, Strasbourg's ancient cobblestones keep their secrets, but one cannot help but wonder, what force could drive hundreds of people to dance themselves to death, and could such a thing ever happen again? Imagine waking up tomorrow morning and discovering that your voice, the very essence of how you communicate with the world, belongs to a stranger. During World War II, in the war-torn landscape of Norway, a woman's life changed forever in the most unexpected way. Struck by enemy shrapnel, she fell unconscious, her fate uncertain. But when she finally opened her eyes and spoke her first words, something had fundamentally shifted. The voice that emerged was unmistakably hers, yet utterly foreign. She now spoke with a distinct German accent, the accent of her country's occupiers. What this Norwegian woman experienced was foreign accent syndrome, a rare neurological condition that occurs when brain injuries affect the delicate speech centers of the mind. The trauma rewires the brain's language pathways, causing individuals to speak in what others perceive as foreign accents. For the Norwegian woman, this cruel twist of fate led to social ostracism in her own homeland, where neighbors viewed her transformed voice with suspicion and hostility. Since the 1940s, medical professionals have documented only about 100 cases of this enigmatic condition worldwide, making it extraordinarily rare. Each case tells a haunting story of identity fractured by circumstance, where the injured brain creates entirely new speech patterns that sound alien to native speakers of their own language. Perhaps most unsettling is what patients report about their own experience. They describe feeling profoundly disconnected from their identity, as if they're trapped inside a body that speaks with a stranger's voice. Family members struggle to recognize the person they once knew, while the afflicted individual hears their own thoughts expressed in tones that feel foreign and wrong. The changes, medical records show, are typically permanent. The brain, in its mysterious attempt to heal, forges new neural pathways that cannot be undone, leaving individuals forever speaking in the voice of somewhere else, someone else. In a world where our voice is often our most intimate identifier, one must wonder, if the very sound of your words became foreign to you, would you still recognize yourself? Imagine a disease so swift and merciless that it could claim a life between sunrise and sunset, vanishing from history as mysteriously as it arrived. In the summer of 1485, as Henry Tudor claimed the English throne, something else swept across the land, something far more terrifying than any army. They called it the sweating sickness, and it would return to haunt England 4 more times over the next 66 years, each outbreak more bewildering than the last. The disease struck with the speed of lightning. Victims would wake healthy and strong, only to be consumed by sudden, violent fever within hours. Profuse sweating would pour from their bodies like rivers, accompanied by splitting headaches and wild delirium. Then came the cruel lottery. Some would emerge from this nightmare alive, while others would simply slip away before the day was done. No physician could predict who would live and who would die. But perhaps most unsettling of all was the sickness's peculiar appetite. Unlike plague or cholera, which ravaged the poor and malnourished, the sweating sickness seemed to hunger for the wealthy and robust. It stalked through manor houses and palaces, claiming lords and ladies while often sparing their servants. The very people who should have been most protected by their privilege found themselves most vulnerable to this invisible predator. King Henry VIII's court became a theater of terror during each outbreak. Nobles would flee in panic at the first whisper of the disease's return, abandoning their positions in power for the hope of survival. The king himself would retreat to his most isolated estates, watching helplessly as his courtiers scattered like leaves before a storm. State business ground to a halt as England's elite cowered in the shadow of an enemy they could neither see nor understand. Then, after 1551, the sweating sickness simply vanished. No final outbreak, no gradual decline. It disappeared as if it had never existed at all. Centuries have passed, and modern medicine has identified countless diseases, yet this medieval killer remains a ghost in the historical record. Its cause, its nature, even its true identity, all remain locked away in the past. What force could strike so precisely, so lethally, and then retreat into the void of history? In the quiet corners of medical libraries, researchers still search for answers to a mystery that claimed thousands of lives, then left without a trace. What happens when hunger becomes something far beyond human comprehension, when the very act of eating transforms into something that defies the laws of nature itself? In 18th century France, military doctors encountered a young man whose existence challenged everything they understood about the human body. Tarrare, as he came to be known, possessed an appetite that transcended mere hunger. It was a consuming void that seemed to devour not just food, but the very essence of what it meant to be human. Each day this gaunt figure could consume his own body weight in sustenance, yet he remained skeletal, his ribs visible beneath translucent skin. The physicians who studied him documented behaviors that read more like folklore than medical records. They watched in horrified fascination as Tarrare devoured live cats whole, swallowed writhing snakes, and consumed lizards as if they were mere morsels. In the sterile halls of the military hospital, he was discovered attempting to drink blood directly from other patients, a scene that left even hardened doctors questioning what they had witnessed. But perhaps most disturbing were the physical manifestations of his condition. Tarrare's body burned with an unnatural heat, his skin constantly glistening with perspiration. When he opened his mouth, visible vapor would escape like steam from some internal furnace. Despite the enormous quantities of food disappearing into his seemingly bottomless stomach, his body remained dangerously emaciated, as if whatever force drove his hunger was consuming him from within. The final chapter of Tarrare's story descended into horror that would haunt the hospital staff forever. When a 14-month-old child vanished from the facility, suspicion fell upon the strange young man whose appetite knew no boundaries. The accusation was too terrible to ignore, too plausible given what they had already witnessed. Expelled from the hospital in disgrace, Tarrare disappeared into the shadows of history, only to die mysteriously at the age of 26. The doctors who performed his autopsy found his internal organs grotesquely enlarged, but even in death, the true nature of his condition remained unexplained. Was Tarrare simply a victim of an unknown medical condition, or had something far more sinister taken residence within his mortal frame, something that hungered not just for food, but for the very essence of life itself? What if you were absolutely convinced that you were dead? Walking among the living is nothing more than an empty shell. What if your own reflection in the mirror showed you a corpse that somehow still moved? In 1880, French neurologist Jules Cotard encountered something that defied all medical understanding. A patient sat before him, calm and resolute, explaining with disturbing certainty that she no longer existed. She believed her brain had vanished, her nerves had withered away, and her chest and stomach had simply ceased to be. In her mind, she was condemned to an eternity of damnation, trapped in a body that should have been buried long ago. This was the first documented case of what would become known as Cotard syndrome. The woman's delusion ran so deep that she refused all food and water. In her logic, the dead do not require sustenance. Why would a corpse need to eat? This terrifying conviction is shared by many who suffer from this rare condition, leading them to waste away as they wait for a death they believe has already claimed them. They become prisoners of their own impossible existence. Perhaps most chilling of all, some patients develop a paradoxical belief in their own immortality. Having already died, they reason they cannot die again. They see themselves as eternal beings, forever trapped between life and death, unable to find peace in either realm. The contradiction seems lost on them, their fractured minds holding two impossible truths simultaneously. Modern brain imaging has offered glimpses into this neurological nightmare. Scans reveal reduced activity in regions responsible for facial recognition and emotional response, suggesting the brain has somehow disconnected from its own sense of self. Yet the deeper mechanisms remain frustratingly elusive, hidden in the shadows of our understanding. Today, Cotard syndrome continues to emerge in psychiatric wards around the world, each case a reminder of how fragile our grip on reality truly is. The patients walk among us, convinced they are already gone, living proof that sometimes the line between life and death exists only in the mind. But if consciousness itself can be deceived so completely, how do any of us know for certain that we truly exist at all? Thank you for watching until the end of the video. If you found this video interesting, let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any of our upcoming videos.